Hey everybody! Tonight we're going to do a nice scene, a wintry scene with a moose. It's going to involve creating a scene in View first, and then going to Daz Studio to create a character. It's kind of the opposite direction I normally go in. Usually I go and export characters from Daz Studio or Poser and put them in a View scene. But we're going to do it the other way around tonight, so it should be fun. So let's get started. Alright, so I fired up View here, and I'm just going to start with creating an empty scene. And we're going to do this as a vertically oriented scene, so let's set that first. Under the aspect ratio, we're just going to pull this drop down menu here and select standard PC vertical. And you see here that you get kind of a grayed out area where that's not going to be in the render. And we get this sort of vertical setups of scene. I'm going to go to the main camera. I'm going to set up to be a 70mm camera. This gives me a lot less distortion on the edges. It doesn't look like a camera shot so much. It's going to look more like a painting, and that's the way I like my artwork to look. And one other thing is you want to make sure that this is turned off right here. This little lock, when it's turned on, things interact with your camera. So if you get objects too close to the camera starts to jump around, and I don't like to lose that control over the scene. So let's turn that off. And we'll create a terrain in the foreground. So to do that, you just click on this little thing over here that looks like a couple of mountains, and that creates a terrain. Now, you might have something else here by default. There's this little F here that will create a procedural terrain, and we don't want that for this scene. That's a lot of math that we don't need to put into our render. So let's delete that one. Let's go to our terrain and move it back away from us a little bit and shrink it down. This is just going to be the foreground. And I don't need it to be quite so tall, so we're going to flatten it out a lot. I'm also going to get rid of the ground. It just gets in the way. And you might try turning it around, see which, if there's any angles that make it look a little bit more exciting. We'll try that one right there. And with the camera, I think I'm going to pan it up so that that ground is pretty low in the composition. All right, we'll go with that. Yeah, it looks pretty good there in the preview render. So let's give this a texture. This is going to be a wintry scene. So we'll pick the terrain, and we'll double click on the, or we'll click here to load a texture. And I'm just going to load a dark, dirty kind of looking texture. Rocks and plants is good. And that's just going to be what's under our snow. Now to make it look like a kind of a snowy winterscape, I'm going to double click on that and go into the material editor. Make sure you're on the advanced material editor, not the basic. And we're going to turn this into a mixed material. And what this does is it loads us, gives us another material down here to mix with our first one. And I'm going to right click on this and load some snow. Now you can see over here in the preview window it kind of mixes the two in place. We want the snow to cover the lower material, so we'll set this up to material mixing method cover, and we'll randomize the distribution a little bit. That looks pretty good, but we also want to have the environment influence this, because we want the snow not to be to kind of be in the areas where the ground is flatter, and kind of the way snow works is it kind of piles into the flat areas and tumbles off the steeper areas. So we will turn on this distribution of materials dependent on local slope, altitude, and orientation, and we'll set the influence of the slope all the way up and the influence of the altitude all the way down, because that's for more like mountains and stuff. And I'm also going to set the material mix just a bit so that there's just a bit of snow on top of our ground. Let's see how that looks in the preview window here. Looks like we still way too much snow, so let's move it down even further. Now we're getting somewhere. Now we got kind of this sort of broken snow look. Perhaps we want a little bit more snow than that, so just experiment around a bit with this. That's good right there. Alright, now I'm going to put some like wintry looking twigs kind of sticking out of this snow, like you have bushes that have lost all their leaves. To do that, we'll turn this into an ecosystem. And just from this drop down box, we'll select this ecosystem slash particles. And here it creates a new layer for the ecosystem. And we're going to go in and add this large dead tree. And we don't want too much of it. We just want a few poking here and there. So I'm going to set the density down really low, around 10%. And here in the Scaling and Orientation tab, I'm going to set this to perpendicular. This will make it so the trees don't go straight up and down. They're going to kind of work with the slope. And we'll set some size variation in. I'll just set it up to 2. And populate. Let's see how that looks over there. It looks like they're a little bit too big here in the preview window. So let's go a bit smaller. We'll just under Scaling and Orientation, we'll set this down to about 0.6-ish. And when you go down in the scaling, sometimes the density increases. So let's decrease the density. Still looking like there's a bit too many there. Let's go down even lower. Let's go down to 1%, see what we get. So we don't want a whole forest of these, just a few poking out here and there. All right, let's do a quick preview of that. Okay, I think those twigs look a little bit too big, and there's something else I forgot to do. So we'll make them a bit smaller still. Go down to 0.4. And I want to, I don't want because they're trees, I don't want the trunk of the tree to be so long. So let's bury these a bit more. And to do that, under density, we can offset from the surface. And this is going to push it down below the surface if I do this. So we'll set it down to, I'm not a real stickler for the thing, so we're setting down 11 meters. So these are probably larger than they, in the scale of the image, than they really are in the perceived. Oops, I forgot to do a. You have to remember to repopulate every time you make a change. I think I may have put them down a little too low. Yeah, we've lost them from the scene. So let's try -2 meters. That's probably going to look a bit better. Well, let's put them a little bit lower. Let's go down to about -4 meters. And I'm actually going to increase the density just a tiny bit. Now I think I'm going to get what I want. There we go. That looks pretty good. So now let's put a quick background in. Shouldn't be too difficult. Go back to the 4 view here. I'm going to create another terrain. If you have this if you're on the wrong kind, you click and hold, and you can select the kind you need. I'm going to make this one very flat and very large. And we'll borrow the terrain from our first one, or the texture, or the material from the first one. All you gotta do is right click on that and copy the material. Click on this, right click, and paste. I'm not going to populate this with all those twigs, so we'll just leave the ecosystem as it is, but don't populate, because I just want the snow in the background. Because this is going to be pretty distant looking, so we won't see too much of it. And we're actually going to delete that ecosystem level and add a new one. Because here we're going to have some real trees. So we'll pick a tree that looks nice and wintry. We'll do maybe this winter pear tree here. And we'll set the size up to be very large. Let's scale it up to about 200. We'll do a bit bigger than that even. Let's go 400. We'll set the density up higher too. Looks like 400 is going to be too big. Yeah, not quite so big. Let's get that back down to maybe 250. Looks pretty good here. Let's increase that density a bit more. Just jack it on up there. Alright, and now we're going to, it's looking a bit dark over here. Let's fix the atmosphere up some. So we'll set the decay amount up a bit. We'll set the haze, some fog along the ground. And we'll set the aerial perspective up all the way to 10. Okay, it's looking a bit too reddish now, but now you can definitely see this atmosphere, how it kind of works. You get some stuff on the distance. Let's set that decay color down really low. So we can get rid of some of that orange. Oh, that's looking pretty good there. Let's got this big tree that kind of got stuck here in the middle, so I'm going to move that terrain so that it's not quite there. Alright, that looks pretty good there. So let's do a quick preview render and let's see if this is good enough to send to final. Okay, so I rather like this. This is a nice scene. It's kind of just a setup. We'll maybe put a character in this later. And then let's set this up for a final render. Just click and hold on the camera up here and we'll get to the render options. We'll set it up for final. You could go with a higher one if you want, but I'm going to go with a rather large resolution, so final's good enough. I'm going to render to screen. And we'll set the size up here to be 5200 by 3900. That's a pretty large size. That'll make a nice size print. And with that, we go to render. Okay, so once the scene is done rendering, we're going to save it off, and that's pretty easy to do. You just click on this little thing that looks like a floppy disk here, and we'll save this up to the desktop. That's where I like to save the stuff that I'm currently working on. We'll just call it winter scene. Let's save that as a bitmap so we don't lose any information. And also, somewhat important, we need to save the depth map. And to do that, you're going to click on this little letter Z here. And what this is going to do is give us a depth map where things that are closer are darker and things that are further are lighter in tone. And we'll save that too. We just click on the disk again. And it's already named it for us, winter scene underscore Z. I'll save that as a bitmap as well. Alright, and with that, we're done with view. Okay, so now let's work on a character to add to our scene. Now I'm going to do a moose for this scene, and we'll just use this one here. This one comes with uses look at my hair to add fur to the animal. And I've already pre-saved a pose for this, so I'm not going to spend time reposing this. So this will be our pose. And I could just render this and then save it off as a PNG and then use GIMP or something to composite this into our winter scene. But what might happen with this fur is that I might get like a bit of a halo where you can kind of see through the edges of the fur to the background. And I get this kind of halo of this grayish blue color. So what I'm going to do is add the background, or add our image into the background here. Okay, so to import the background, we just click on this little button right here, and we go and we select our file. And there it is, and then we just position, we accept this, and then we just sort of position the scene to where the moose is right about where we want it. One thing you want to do is go to your render settings, and make sure your render is the same size as the background image. In this case it's 3900 by 5200. So let's render that and see how this looks. Once the scene is done rendering, we're going to save that off. We'll save this to a bitmap as well on the desktop. We'll just call it moose. And we'll save that off. Alright, so next we'll move on to GIMP and do some compositing work to finish this up. Okay, so I have here loaded the 3 images that we've created. Our snowy forest scene, the depth map for that scene, and then the same scene that we rendered with Daz Studio with the moose in it. Now you see the moose looks kind of like he's pasted on top, and what we're going to do is integrate him real quick using the other 2 files. And to do that, I'm going to go over here first to the depth map, and I'm going to go up to colors and select threshold. and sort of find that spot where the foreground separates from the background, which is right about here, and click OK. And we'll select all, copy that, and go over to our actual scene and paste it on there. And we'll just paste it as a new layer. Alright, and then I'm going to select by color and select the black here and delete that layer, and what that leaves me with is the foreground area selected. So now all I have to do is copy that, and we'll paste that. And what that does, we'll solidify the new layer that it created, is that it creates a new layer with just the foreground. One thing I'm going to do real quick is, if you see this little dotted yellow line here, this whole layer only goes about a third of the way up the image. We want the layer to be the whole image. And to do that, you just create a new transparent layer and merge that down into our new layer. And now we cover the whole screen. And what I'm going to do is just copy this layer and go to our moose scene, and then we'll paste. And make that layer solid, and just like that, our moose now looks like he's more into the scene because the foreground covers over his feet down there. I'm not going to do a whole lot more here, but I am going to add some fog to this to kind of make it look like the thing kind of fits together better, because the moose looks a little bit intense compared to the surroundings. So I'm just going to create a new transparent layer, and I'm going to put it between the foreground and background. And I'm going to go to the airbrush tool and select a smoke brush. And I'll have a link for the smoke brush in the notes for the show here, because this doesn't come with GIMP normally. It's something you can find online for free though. And we'll pick the color black, and we'll get a pretty big size for this brush, but not too huge. I'm just going to go around the edges a bit, creating some dark areas. Not a whole lot, just something to kind of act as shadows in the fog. And we'll switch to white. And now we'll come over here and start layering in some nice layers of fog. Now we want to avoid his head because we want that to be kind of clear and be sort of the focus of this scene. And we'll make the fog denser as we get lower to the ground. Alright, we'll create one more layer in the foreground. And we'll put that on top, and we'll just add a little bit of fog down here to make it kind of work a little bit more in the foreground as well. Like I said, we don't have to do a whole lot. Maybe I want to mess around with the colors a bit in the lowest layer here. So we'll go down to colors and levels. And just we'll mess around with the sliders a little bit. Okay. And we'll flatten this all out. And we'll go back into colors and the curves. And maybe try pulling the curves around to see if that changes anything for the better. Here, let's do that so you can see it. I don't really like that. Okay. Okay, with that, I think we'll call this one done. We'll save it off. Export as. And we'll save it to the desktop for now. We'll save it as a JPEG. Now when you save it as a JPEG, you want to be sure and have it about as high quality as you can get. Just set it up to 100 for now. If you're going to upload this to like a print-on-demand site, you might want to click this Show Preview and Image window and then see what the file size is going to be. So for instance, The print-on-demand service I use won't allow uploads of more than 25 megabytes, but this one, even at 100%, is 20 megabytes, so that's good. So we'll save that off. So if you like this video and you'd like to see more, or read some of my articles, or even check out some of my art, you can find me on my blog at www.introvertartist.com. And here I post articles on how to make art, how to sell it online, tools that you can use. I have links to my gallery, as well as you can subscribe to my newsletter here. And my newsletter is something I send out every Wednesday with news on my latest artworks, articles, videos, promotions, discounts, and I even throw in a free computer wallpaper every week. So thanks, everybody, and good night.